We're going to be talking about Nesta's Dynamic Demand Challenge Prize. My name is Helen Goulden from Nesta's Innovation Lab, and for those of you who don't know much or anything about Nesta, we're an independent charity funded through a national endowment, and we exist to support innovation in the UK to help bring great ideas to life that solve some of our most pressing social and environmental challenges. We do this through a whole range of mix of things, whether financing or investing in great ideas, developing innovation skills, and undertaking a broad range of policy and research work. The aim of today's webinar is to raise awareness of our Dynamic Demand Challenge Prize and provide a little bit of context and discuss the importance of stimulating innovation in this area. And we also want to highlight ways in which you can get involved. So what's the problem that we're dealing with? Well, it's becoming a well-known fact that our electricity system is under increasing pressure to keep up with ever-growing electricity demand, and that ensuring a really consistent and responsive supply of electricity is a really fine balancing act. This we know, and pressure on and from governments to move towards a low-carbon economy adds somewhat of complexity to this problem through a growing decentralized renewable energy generation network. And dynamic demand, or demand-side response, represents a real opportunity to tackle these challenges. Dynamic demand products and services can help shift electricity consumption away from peak hours where electricity consumption is high, or allow much greater use of excess electricity generation for renewable energy. So on the 1st of July this year, Nesta, through our Centre for Challenge Prizes in partnership with the National Physical Laboratories Centre for Carbon Measurement, launched the Dynamic Demand Challenge Prize, and it's funded by Nesta, by the Department of Business Innovation and Skills, and by Climate Kick. The Challenge Prize is very kindly sponsored by the National Grid, who you'll be hearing about today, and the Imperial College London, who are hosting our hacking events. And the challenge that we're putting out there is straightforward in some ways. We want to see the generation and creation of a new product, technology or service that utilizes data to significantly improve the ability of households or small businesses to demonstrate measurable reduction in carbon emissions by shifting energy demand to off-peak times or towards excess renewable generation. The challenge is set out, the whole range of process and stages is set out on the website that we'll put the address up for in a bit, and offers a whole range of financial support, stages and professional guidance for people wanting to put their hat in the ring and enter it. And a final award of £50,000 will be made to the entry that demonstrates the most significant impact. That'll be measured by NPL's Centre for Carbon Measurement within the challenge timeframe. Today what we're going to do is give you a really exciting range of speakers and panelists who've joined us today, and I'll introduce them just in turn briefly now. Firstly, we're going to hear from Tom Burke. Tom Burke is a founding director of E3G. He's currently an environmental policy advisor to Rio Tinto plc and a visiting professor at Imperial University Colleges London. He writes a regular political column in Ends magazine, and he's a member of the External Review Committee of Shell and sits on the Sustainable Sourcing Advisory Board of Unilever. Tom's going to be talking to us about the growing, the context of the growing demand on the UK grid, the absolute need for policy and innovation in this area. Following Tom, we're going to be here from Jane Burston. Jane is the head of the Centre of Carbon Measurement at NPL. The Centre for Carbon Measurement reduces uncertainties in climate data, provides robust measurement of greenhouse gas emissions, and helps to develop and verify the performance of low-carbon technologies, so they're a critical partner for the Dynamic Demand Challenge Prize. Jane was founder and CEO of Carbon Retirement formerly. In 2001, she was named as Management Today's 35 High-Flying Women Under 35 list and Square Mile Magazine's Social Entrepreneur of the Year. She's going to be talking to us a little bit about what NPL is and does, and how and why they're involved in the Dynamic Demand Challenge, and the importance of accurately measuring impact. Following Jane, we're going to hear from Neil Rowley. He's the procurement manager at the National Grid, and he has 10 years experience working within the National Grid and the electricity market. Within this time, he's worked directly with generators connecting to the transmission system before moving to work within market financial regulation. Neil's work's focused on really facilitating supply of services and demand, and so someone who's very aware of the detail of how dynamic demand products, services and technologies can operate within a national infrastructure. He'll be explaining to us the role of the National Grid and explaining more about his work and what he feels is important when it comes to the Dynamic Demand Challenge Prize. And lastly, but by no means least, we'll be hear from Dr. Franke Burke. Franke is the Climate Kick Entrepreneurship Lead in Germany, and Climate Kick is one of the 3 knowledge and innovation communities designated in 2001 by the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, with a real mission to lead the world towards low-carbon prosperity. Franke's got 8 years of experience in supporting startups, and before Climate Kick, she did her PhD at the Chair for Innovation and Technology Management at Berlin. She'll be talking to us about innovation across Europe and bringing some of her insights and experiences about the Open Innovation Slam that was run last year. So that's a quick rundown of our panel, and following their short presentations, I hope we'll have plenty of time for you to ask questions of them, and of course from Constance Agyeman. She's the lead at Nesta, running the Dynamic Demand Challenge Prize, and she'll be able to answer many of our questions on process or criteria or on the stages of the prize. So that's probably enough for me. Our speakers are going to speak each in turn, handing over to each other. So Tom, you're going to be giving us a keynote. Can I invite you to kick us off with your perspective on the nature of the challenge we're facing here?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I guess mine is the easiest job, simply to set out why this prize in this area is so important and so urgent. That really stems from the fact that your energy policy is, for all practical purposes, your climate policy, and you have to make the two work together. And governments have agreed that 2 degrees increase in temperature is the threshold of dangerous climate change. They've all ratified the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which obliges them to work to keep the temperature below 2 degrees. So whatever you might read in the newspapers, it's very difficult to imagine that governments aren't going to be trying very hard to square that obligation with all their other obligations. And what that means is building a carbon-neutral global energy system by around about 2050 or so. The UK has already committed itself to aiming for an 80% reduction by then. Actually, I think we could and should do a lot better than that. Arriving at that sort of overall goal is something that we could do with technologies that are already available. But actually, as you look forward over the next 40-odd years, there's a lot more low-carbon technology to come, and you'd be very foolish if you tried to predict what the technology shape would look like in the middle of the century. But what you can predict, I think, with a lot of accuracy, is that if we've achieved a carbon-neutral global energy system, then there won't be 2 billion people driving around in vehicles with internal combustion engines. And what that signifies is 2 things. One, that we're talking about a transformation of the energy system, not a marginal change. And 2, there's going to be a massive move to electricity, particularly if you want to keep a role for fossil fuels, as long as they have carbon capture and storage in your energy mix. But we're going to be doing that in a world that is changing at an accelerating rate and is becoming increasingly risk averse, and also in a world in which transformation will be very strongly opposed by entrenched interests. And what I think that means, and what I think is presenting the real opportunity here for innovation in the electricity sector, is that a lot of the current business models are not going to be compatible with the transformation that needs to take place. And much of what you hear from commentators, particularly business commentators, about change in the electricity system is very, very conservative, because it simply can't conceive of a world with a very different business model, and wants to hang on to a world in which generation of electricity remains top-down rather than bottom-up. Now, this prize is exactly aimed at creating a much more bottom-up approach to thinking about how you might meet those twin demands of climate security and energy security. And that basically is a shift from thinking about big size for generation to thinking about big numbers. And that's in particular where the whole management of demand and the electricity grid is going to become increasingly important, because doing that in a sophisticated, modern, information-rich way allows you to bring lots and lots and lots of people, households, businesses, into the generation game rather than a small number of big utilities. And that provides security by diversity and distribution, not by massive, very high capital generation sets, which I think are going to be increasingly difficult to finance as we go forward. But what that means in strategic level, and it'd be interesting to hear National Grid comment on this, is you really need to think about what you want the grid for, your electricity grid for, and design your grid to meet those tasks, and then fit technologies to the grid. Not what we're doing now, which I think inhibits the use of a lot of the kind of devices and services that this prize is aimed at stimulating, not try to adapt your grid to whatever technologies you happen to think you want to build. And in that context, this whole area, D3 as it's often called, of managing demand or demand response, of distributed generation and of demand reduction becomes the key to the future. And that's going to be a change that is going to be much more like the ICT revolution than it is like previous energy transitions. It's going to be driven by lots and lots and lots of decision makers playing a part, not by a very small number of decision makers often getting it wrong. And that, it seems to me, is the challenge that this prize is aimed at, stimulating more innovation and creativity to meet that sort of challenge. As I look at that sort of future, the whole process of electricity market reform in Britain has missed an opportunity. And the difficulties are going to be not just technological and economic, but also political. And that means we have to think of innovation. You have to think not just of technology in terms of innovation and the goods and services that that can produce, but you need to have a three-dimensional view of innovation, which also looks at policy, which looks at financial innovation and regulatory innovation, as well as technological innovation, because it's those packages that will actually succeed in making the difference in what will be very much a policy-led future. I'm not going anymore.
Great. Thank
Sorry, that was
That's
an end.
fine.
It's much easier when you're visible because people can see you stop.
All those visual clues are missing, but thank you very much, Tom. Really interesting to hear that kind of system innovation perspective, actually something we're thinking quite a lot about Nesta about. Jane, would you like to talk to us a bit about NPL and why you're involved in this challenge?
Absolutely. So for those people who might not have heard of the National Physical Laboratory before, I'll just give a quick introduction to what the organisation does. We're the UK's National Measurement Institute, and we're a science and technology lab owned by the government and operated by a contractor, Serco. We're about 650 people, the vast majority of whom are scientists. And we're responsible for developing and maintaining the measurement infrastructure in the UK and the base scientific units on which all measurements in the UK are based. So we often work at the interface between research and development and the science that's done in universities and its commercial deployment with startups or very large organisations. I run the Centre for Carbon Measurement, which pulls together all of the climate science and low carbon technology work across NPL. And we work across a range of different technologies, so renewables, building materials, lots of different low carbon technologies, helping to manufacturers to develop them and then doing performance verifications of the technologies once they've been established. So we've got a number of ways that we're involved in the challenge. We've been closely involved in the development of it with Nesta and the wider advisory panel. And we've completed a report looking into the background research about, for anyone new to the topic of dynamic demand and the wider issues surrounding energy management. But it also includes things that might be useful to those of you who are more familiar with the topic. The report covers things like why the prize is important, what we're looking to do with it, and it's called The Challenge of Shifting Peak Electricity Demand. So if people want some more information on the background, in addition to what the panellists today will be talking about, then you can find that report on the Challenge website. Our involvement going forward is going to be threefold. We're going to help support the applicants whilst they're developing their ideas after the initial submission. We're going to provide measurement and testing facilities so that, and expertise, so that participants can have their technologies tested, for which information will be passed on to the judges. And we're also going to help participants calculate the carbon savings of their innovation. So I'm just going to go through each of those things in a little bit more detail. So on the support for applicants, we're going to provide some of our scientists to the hack event, but also for those participants that get through to the next round, we're going to provide some of the scientists' time and consultancy to help develop the individual technologies. We're anticipating that the expertise that will be most required will be electrical engineering and electrical measurement, and also maybe mathematics and modelling for those people who are thinking of developing software applications. So we'll be there at the hackathon to bounce ideas off, to ask questions about the design of prototypes or how different options for developing a prototype might work in practice. And then we can work individually with applicants who've got through to the second round. On the measurement and testing side of things, obviously measuring the impact of the innovations is going to be incredibly important. I think it's quite a tired phrase, you can't manage what you don't measure, but it tends to come out when talking about things like electricity demand management, because it's obviously going to be critical to determine whether or not the innovations that people come up with are working to the extent that people had hoped. So we will be helping to test the finalist technologies, and that will be part of the information submitted to the judges on which they base the decision about the final winner. But what we also hope is the information which we provide about the technologies and how well they fared during the testing stage will be useful to those participants, even the ones that didn't win, in further developing their technology if they want to take it forward, and in providing evidence to potential clients or investors if they're attempting to commercialize the technology. And the final area where we're supporting the prize is in the calculation of the carbon savings that can be attributed to individual technologies. It's quite difficult in this area actually to calculate the carbon savings because there is no one single methodology for doing it. So in order to help ensure that all of the technologies are assessed on a like-for-like basis, we're going to provide the methodology for calculating the carbon savings, and in using data that participants will provide to us about their technology and how they foresee it being used, we can calculate benchmark values for the likely carbon savings once these products have been scaled up. And the judges will also be able to use that information to determine which technology is deemed to be the winner. So the final question that I was asked to talk about was, what does success look like? And the best thing that I could do here is point people towards the report that I mentioned, again, the challenge of shifting peak electricity demand, which can be found on the Challenge's website, because within that there are examples of existing technologies within this sector that are already commercialized and working, and it would be great if we could have something else that will be able to stand up alongside those existing technologies and be commercialized in a similar way.
Great, thank you very much, Jane, and from NPL, providing some incredibly helpful support to our participants in the Challenge Prize as it progresses. Next up, we're going to hear obviously from Neil Rowley. Neil, why don't you talk to us about the National Grid's perspective, particularly perhaps in response to some of Tom's comments.
Thanks, Helen. I feel a little bit on the spot on Tom's comments there, but we'll have a go. So yeah, I'm going to give you a sort of National Grid perspective. I'm going to start with what National Grid does, just to make sure we've not got any assumptions that are incorrect. So National Grid is the transmission owner for England and Wales, which means that we manage the maintenance, replacement and growth of any cables, wires, transformers and the like, the 132 kV operating range. But more importantly for this event is our role as system operator. And again, you can categorize our system operator role as really two main things. And one is managing the integrity of the system itself. And what I mean by that is where the market has done all its trading and suppliers have bought to meet their needs of the customers. We need to make sure that the actual physical assets on the ground can cope with that solution. So in effect, the power flows. And again, the next thing that we do, which is probably of slight more importance again for this forum, is really the role of residual balancer. So the role of residual balancer is all about us taking the market solution where the suppliers have bought to meet their customers' needs, and we then just top it up or bring it back down slightly to what the actual demand is on the day, which is important because it is very difficult for suppliers to get that 100% correct. At this point, I also think it's worth noting that in that sort of capacity, we really are responsible for about 5% of the overall energy flows which flow through the network, so leaving the market with the remaining 95%. And that's interesting because the market is predominantly set up, kind of coming back to Tom's point here, to be driven by generators supplying to suppliers. And in effect, demand products in the wholesale market are pretty much in a minority at the moment. So it creates the question, why can't demand get into the supply area? And I think that's something we can just leave with you guys. So focusing a little bit more on the residual balancing role itself, this is something that is already a very time-consuming and complex process for us to manage. And that's against the current position, which is of course a very changing position. So we have the loss of these more polluting conventional generators such as oil and coal being replaced by the more renewable forms of solar and PV. And that brings along with it a change from large centralized generating centres, which our network is designed to, again coming back to Tom's point, towards more distributed forms of energy provision that again create changing power flows across the system. We're also seeing that there's changing demand going on as the debate about energy rages on and the costs associated increase. We're seeing greater innovation coming along, we're seeing greater engagement from those that own assets, and we start to see maybe a more active participation in demand than was previously there. So all of which leads to a position where the environment is now less about a fairly stable demand position and a generation portfolio that you move just to meet that demand, to affect two sides of the seesaw that can move up and down independently. So that in itself creates a massive challenge for not only National Grid but the industry as a whole, the suppliers as well. And in that, how do we manage this new form of generation portfolio and the new demands that are coming along, whilst keeping costs down, which is important to everybody. So ultimately, I think it's fair to say that we are of the view that as a nation we're going to see increased balancing services required. And like I say, I want to stress that those balancing services are not just with National Grid, they are with the market as a whole. So it's worth noting that suppliers are there. They're going to be increasingly interested in how they can meet their customers' needs over the day and over the way in which demand grows, ebbs and flows over that day. We also like to see network owners themselves become more interested in whether there are alternative solutions to meeting alternatives to asset investment. So DNOs, for example, may well look to procure demand side as an alternative to sticking more cable in the ground. And then there's, of course, ourselves, National Grid, who will continuously be interested in reserve products and response products in order to resolve whatever the market has not been able to at the time. So that's really a quick high-level summary of ourselves in the market, and I guess the challenge is everybody should be interested. National Grid certainly is.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Neil. And just moving finally then on to hearing from Dr. Franke Burke about the European context. She's from Climate Kick. Welcome, Franke.
Yes, welcome. I'd like to do that. I will speak about Climate Kick's involvement in the challenge, and I will also give an example from last year to show what the participants can expect. But before I do that, I'd like to tell you who we are. Climate Kick is the European network that was created by the EIT about 4 years ago. Our big strength is our broad European community. We have strong partners from industry, universities, other institutions, and also startups. And what we do is we stimulate innovation and technology that have a real impact on climate change mitigation and adaptation and can be commercialized very quickly. So, and as I'm part of the Climate Kick's entrepreneurship program, I'd like to mention that we are particularly interested in aiming at generating more climate-related startups. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say that it's a great pleasure for Climate Kick to fund this challenge because, yeah, it's an exciting opportunity to discover new ideas that have the potential to reduce carbon emissions. And also the topic of the challenge is really relevant for Climate Kick because it addresses one of the biggest challenges of our time, climate change, and also reliable energy supply from renewables. I will speak about Climate Kick's area of activity now. Climate Kick does not only provide the funding, but also professional guidance. So that means we will bring in the experience from former challenges. We will help to promote the challenge within our broad network. We will help to promote it to our innovator community, and we started to do that already a few days ago and already received very positive feedback. And we will also provide access to the Climate Kick network for the winners of the challenge for further collaboration, for example, with our industry partners or maybe the winners, they think of establishing their own company so they can become part of our acceleration program and receive further funding of up to 95,000 euros. Yeah, and I also, Climate Kick will also bring in, of course, the European perspective because we are a European network and we deliver across Europe. So we always address global challenges that have an ongoing market potential across Europe. And the dynamic demand challenge, it's, although it is organized within a UK context, the dynamic demand management is an issue in other parts of the world as well. The challenge addresses households, and this is a really attractive field because according to the European Commission, about 39% of all total energy usage happens in households. So the technologies that will be developed during this challenge can have a huge impact on reduction of CO2 emissions worldwide. And I'd like to mention that we also we always make sure that events or formats that we fund are built in a way that they are able to reach startups across Europe. And we definitely think that that's the case here because the combination of a crowdsourced online platform with an offline event similar to a startup weekend is really attractive for startups in a way that they can meet like-minded people and they will have access to resources to refine their ideas. Yeah, maybe now it's time to share a best practice example with you from last year. Because last year Climate Kick organized or supported another challenge called Open Innovation Slam. And this one focused on tackling heat and energy loss in domestic households. We reached about 800 registered users, and 50 teams posted their ideas on the website, where the 10 best teams were invited to a venture weekend to Berlin. And the group of participants was very international. We had participants from Italy, Cyprus, Switzerland, Germany, and the Netherlands. And the quality of the ideas, I have to say, was really good, surprising good. Yeah, and during the venture weekend, which is similar to the hackathon, just that the technical component is not that intense. The participants took part in a weekend full of great coaching and workshops and interaction with other teams, and of course hard work. And the first prize went to a team from Cyprus. They are called Enamap, and what they did is they developed a free-to-access software application that maps and color codes buildings according to their energy consumption rating. So, and after the challenge, it was really good, they received huge media coverage in Cyprus. That was a big topic there, that they won an European challenge. And the team is currently developing its business model with the help of Climate Kick's entrepreneurship team in the UK. So I can really recommend to take part in this challenge. And I would like to end my talk with the words of one of our former participants. He said that that was one of the best experiences of his life. Yeah, and you can find a link to the movie of the Open Innovation Slam from last year on the website. And to get a
Great.
Of the atmosphere there.
Great, thank you so much, Franca. I'm going to give a little bit of an opportunity for people to think about jotting down some questions through the webinar. But before we sort of take any questions from other people out there, I just wanted to ask one question to all of our panelists, which is from someone who's has a kind of some knowledge but perhaps limited engagement about just what's possible when it comes to dynamic demand. Can I ask all of you just to have a quick think and respond to, what would be the most exciting thing that could happen as a result of this Dynamic Demand Challenge Prize? Who'd like to kick us off? Really?
Go on. This is Jane from MPL. I can kick us off. So I think the most exciting thing for the participant would be to have a technology that they develop as part of the prize that then through the prize and being able to showcase it to the national grid and nationally and internationally through the Climate Kick can turn into a commercial proposition.
Great. Thanks, Jane. Anybody else?
I'll come in here. I'll come in here, Neil.
Thanks, Neil.
So, I think for myself, one of the interesting things that I personally see is technology is such now that industrial and commercial capabilities around demand side are generally there. In effect, I'd say medium-sized demands now have the ability to be well controlled, measured, and dispatched, and therefore can participate. The real next barrier for me is the domestic market, which is a much greater challenge, especially for the measurement and the verification of the service. So I think that would be a really important step.
Great, thanks, Neil. And anyone else finally before we start answering a few questions? Tom, what do you think?
What would I really like to see sort of coming out? We're going to make a shift eventually to electric vehicles. What would accelerate that shift is a significant commitment to investing in the charging infrastructure. If that when that takes place, there's going to be a tremendous role for that network to be central to dynamic demand response management, as you have vehicles that connect up either to charge or to be available as a storage technique, and working out the sort of way in which that could be done would be extremely important. What is the right, first of all, making sure that we have a common European interface, by the way, for charging, but then also making sure that you have the right algorithms so that we can really use that potential to enormously increase the efficiency with which we can use the grid.
Great, thanks, Tom. And Frank, I'm just thinking about your sort of Open Innovation Slam experiences. Now that since you've run something quite similar, you must have some view about what the next step might be, or what the next exciting product or service might be.
Maybe I can answer from an innovator's perspective, and in relation to the event that happens in October, the hackathon event, because I think this is it's a great opportunity, since it offers a way to support new technologies, and you can test your technology there. There will be experts there, and you can use data sets to test your technology, and this is really important. And also the people you will meet there, that they will be peers, and you will meet like-minded people. You can meet and mingle with them, and also, of course, it's always important, refine your ideas. It's really important to have a chat with your peer group, and of course with experts as well.
Yeah, an important part of the process, isn't it? I think getting that energy and insight from other people who are really interested in solving similar challenges. I just wanted to answer a quick question from Charles. Constance, perhaps you can enlighten us. Can a university from South Africa participate in the challenge?
Unfortunately, due to the scope and parameters of this challenge, it's only open to UK and European entrants only. So it doesn't extend to South African participants, but please do visit the site, comment on the ideas that are there. You still have a way of kind of getting involved and talking about the challenges and commenting on those.
Great, thanks, Constance. Great, thanks, Constance. Just before we've not got a tremendous amount of questions, so do encourage you to sort of do pop your question in the box if you want us to answer something in the next 20 minutes. Constance, I just wanted to ask you really, perhaps if you could give us a quick run-through of the key milestones and processes
and the stages
of the Challenge Prize.
Okay, so the challenge prize is open for entrants up until the 9th of 9th of September, apologies. So that's the deadline for entries. So you go onto the Dynamic Demand website, post your ideas on there, and the deadline will be 9th of September. Beyond that point, we'll be doing the assessments, and the 10 selected ideas will be invited to attend the hackathon, which is being run by Imperial College London. So there will be a few days of working on those prototypes, developing those ideas further. Imperial College alumni will be there to offer support, as well as our partners from National Grid, NPL and Climate Kick. There will be a whole range of expertise and support that's provided to really take those ideas to the next level on those prototypes to get developed. Once we reach the end of that hackathon, up to 5 of those ideas will be selected by our judges, and they will be supported for a further 6 months with expertise and financial support to continue to develop those prototypes. The prototypes will then go through a testing phase with NPL, and the results of that will form part of the judging criteria.
Great, thanks, Constance. Jane, can you tell us a bit more about how the prototypes? Jane, can you tell us a bit more about how the prototypes will be tested?
It's actually quite difficult to talk now about how exactly they'll be tested, because it really depends on the technologies that people come forward with. We're hoping that there'll be a huge range of innovations here, and so we're not even quite sure whether it's going to be software or tangible technologies that people like plugs that people would fit into their houses, or technologies that people would fit into existing appliances like washing machines or dishwashers. So notwithstanding all of that, the way that we tend to do testing is first of all to look at developing a methodology for how that individual prototype would be tested, look at what it's claiming to do and how that performance could be verified. And we're looking to test all of the prototypes in a lab-based environment. So we're not expecting these technologies to be at the stage where, at the end of this challenge, at the stage where they will be able to be tested in the field, but we do expect them to be working within the lab environment.
Great, thanks Jane. And while we're just with you on that subject of NPL's engagement and support for the programme, when we've got a kind of project or an idea that involves some element of behaviour change, will NPL be supporting the process of how we can measure that as well?
On the behaviour change side of things, that is much less our remit. We have scientists who can test tangible technologies and software. With behaviour change, people would need to suggest ways that their assumptions about that could be validated, and that would need to be looked at by potentially economists or sociologists.
Great, thank you. Now, the crunchy issue of IP has been raised, as we suspected it would. Someone's asked us who will own the IP of any of the ideas created. Constance.
The IP remains with the entrant throughout the whole process. So even though the idea is supported and developed further with a whole range of expertise and support from the partners and from Nesta, we want to ensure that the IP remains with the entrant throughout the process. So the further you get along in the process, any contracts or agreements will stipulate that and make that clear along the way as well.
Great, thank you. Other kind of
Great, thank you.
Questions about IP
other kind of questions about IP will be
kind
of answered if you wanted to contact us separately to that. Franca, we've had another question thinking about what the highlights are from the hack. Are hacks for everyone? I guess some people are asking out there, will it really be a good use of their time and will it be beneficial to them?
Definitely, yes.
Would be the short answer.
I mean, it will be hard work, so I can't deny that. But that's, I mean, it's only a weekend, or it's maybe 2.5 days. You really should use your time effectively. And if you really want to, if you really have to develop something creative, or if you really want to change something, then it's the best possibility actually, because you have the opportunity to test your idea with experts. And I can only repeat myself, it's a great opportunity for everybody who takes part, also for the experts, I would say.
Thanks, Franca. Good underlining of the importance of that hack. John Pickens asking, would a technology that's solely energy saving and does not use data especially be something that the challenge is looking for? Constance.
There will be data generated from the use of that technology one way or another. So essentially the answer to that question is yes, we will be looking for energy saving, shifting demand solutions, and the data that will be generated through the use of that, which the entrant could be supported with, will then be utilised by NPL. So there will be a data aspect to your solution anyway.
Great, thank you. Question for Tom.
Great, thank you. Question for Tom, perhaps. How likely is it that the government will change the energy bill to enable incentive payments for domestic dynamic response as per its response to the recent DR consultation? And will utilities support these payments?
I think there is a much more positive reaction from approach now from DEC to demand side than there was 12 months ago, but it's late, it's behind the curve somewhat. So it's not going to be as fast as it could have been.
Great, thank you. Across the panel, there's a question here from Christopher. He's saying at a higher level, he wondered what the panel think are the main challenges facing smart grid deployment in the UK. Tom, Neil, perhaps you have some views on that.
Well, I think we have a totally muddled energy policy and a real lack of clarity in thinking in government, and that makes it really hard to specify what challenges we're looking for innovation to meet. We've got ourselves into a sort of infantile energy policy saying all of the above without remotely beginning to explain how that's compatible, how you can have gas and renewables and nuclear and energy efficiency and somehow demand management. There's no coherent narrative about how all of that's supposed to fit together, and that, I think, chills investment. It chills private sector investment a lot, but it also means there's no clear direction for public sector investment. And at the end of the day, the grid is a public infrastructure. It's like the road network, and it's something in which, if you want the grid to do clever and sophisticated things, you need to be prepared to invest in from the public sector. And right now, there's no coherent narrative from government as to what on earth it's trying to do with our electricity future.
Interesting. Thank you, Tom. Neil, did you have any observations on that?
Yeah, I'm probably thinking about it from a slightly different angle to Tom. So I think, for me, although I'm not that close to all the regulation and design of the smart meters, I think the thing that I think most about in this space is how it can all joined up in a cohesive manner, from the capabilities of the meters themselves to the data provision, to then that flowing through to settlement systems, and then ultimately to would-be dispatchers such as National Grid and suppliers. So I think that's my issue around it. How well has it been thought through to work as one cohesive unit in that manner? You know, for me, the benefits of the smart meter to enable any consumer out there to be able to say, yes, I want to provide a service for X, Y, and Z reasons, and to whoever, it needs to have the flexibility to be able to achieve that.
Great.
This is Jane from MPL here. The report that we did also collated a number of challenges in addition to those that Neil and Tom have just identified in relation to the smart grid. And I think one of the main ones that hasn't been mentioned yet is the need for consumer engagement and clear communication. I don't know whether people saw in the news a few months ago in the Daily Mail, this was specifically, that demand-side response technologies were being called things like Big Brother and sinister. So I think involving the public in operating the technologies is going to be critical, and allaying public concern over any automation of demand-side response is also a really big challenge.
I was going to actually, what I was going to say follows exactly that point. It's a function of the very incoherent structure that we currently have to electricity system management, that National Grid are doing brilliant things to organize and mobilize communities with their Massachusetts company that they can't do here because there are policy barriers to them doing it here. And I completely agree with the thought that actually the more we can involve communities in this, the more we will be able to deliver electricity that is both low carbon and affordable.
That feels very true, and it comes back also to your point, Tom, at the very start of the presentation, which is around, you know, actually the solutions to this increasingly complex sort of system problem requires many, not just a few actors to be involved in developing solutions and being involved in pulling the levers for change. We could go on this subject, I'm sure, for quite a bit. I wanted to try to get answered a couple of questions back towards kind of the detail of the challenge prize. So there's a few questions that are bubbling away. Are we looking for conceptual ideas or actual startups? What level of detail should the idea have? Is it about bringing existing things together or the completely new? Constance, could you advise us on those sorts of things?
We're looking for a broad range of different ideas. So as long as the concept is a workable one and the entrant feels like if that concept is selected, they'd be able to tangibly work that into a prototype or a service blueprint, then yes, please submit concept. But with the caveat that it should be something that can be worked on and not completely blue sky. In terms of whether it's a completely new thing or whether it's building on something else. It's a combination of both. What we want to see is innovation, and that can be something that's completely new and not thought of before, but it can also be adding to, enhancing, developing further some solutions that are already out, as long as it's clear of how that's built upon and how that development is going, then that should be enough to convince us of the level of innovation associated with the solution.
Great, thank you, Constance.
That are comments, some that we can answer offline potentially, and anything that's been submitted that hasn't been answered we will pick up separately with you or publish out separately as a kind of full list of FAQs in response to your contributions. Before we sort of say thank you to our speakers and give you a bit more on the sort of what happens next in terms of the calls to action, are there any kind of observations or reflections or final comments from our panel they might like to make before we close off? Jane, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. I think I would say, don't be shy in submitting your ideas. Through the hackathon and the support that we're planning on providing, everybody will have the opportunity to embellish their ideas. So to the person who asked the question, can I just submit an idea on a piece of paper? The answer is absolutely for now, so long as you're prepared over the next year to work with others to develop that. So I would just encourage people to get applying.
Great, thanks Jane. And Franca?
Yes, I would like to highlight the need for consumer engagement again, or the need for mobilizing people, because since we are addressing a societal problem here, we really need to refer to habits and to encourage solutions that set incentives and to have the potential to change people's habits, because people do things when it's convenient for them. For example, turning on the washing machine or the dishwasher. They won't change their behavior unless it's beneficial for them. So I really encourage solutions for that.
Great, thank you. Neil?
I guess for me, I'm interested in the sort of timeline of this sort of stuff. And I mean, Tom rightly highlighted that electric vehicles and I guess also electrification of heat might be key enablers, along with smart meters, to achieving true demand participation. But for me, it's kind of what can we do now? Really, it's the key thing. What simple, cheap, quick implementing ways have we got now to really enable some demand getting into managing the electricity system?
Great, thank you. And closing the circle, taking us back to where we started, Tom, your final words.
Well, it's just that we've got to get onto the right trajectory. So as you think about the things we can do now, ideas that Neil was mentioning, we also need to be thinking about, but where is that taking us? And demand management, one way or another, is always going to be cheaper than new generation, particularly if you're looking at big generating sets. And I think this is exactly in tune with the idea that what we now can do with our modern information handling capacity is this is a big data issue. And we're finding out in a lot of other areas what you can do once you apply those sort of ideas and techniques to managing the data about people's electricity use. Will give us tremendous potential to make our economy more competitive, as well as providing a better deal for consumers.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of our speakers, Tom, Franca, Neil, Jane, to people who contributed and people listening. We will answer any remaining comments and questions that you've highlighted to us. I'd encourage you to visit the dynamicdemandnesta.org.uk website, enter the challenge, register for the hackathon as soon as you can. If you want to, let us know about other data sources that would be really useful in developing solutions that we could put out there, and stay in touch with developments on the Nesta website. So thank you to everybody joining us. And good luck to anyone who chooses to enter our Dynamic Demand Challenge Prize. Have a lovely day. Bye.